Welcome back. I'm Dave Rossi. This is Summit County Connections, and I've got 3 county commissioners with me today. Let's start with Elizabeth.
Hi.
Elizabeth Lawrence, County Commissioner. Tamara Poe.
Good morning.
And then we have Nina Waters.
Pleased to meet you.
She's new on the scene here. So you guys, we're going to talk about kind of the things that we've just recently done, some of the issues that are coming up, and what's coming up in the next couple months. So first of all, tomorrow we had we called a legislative housing tour. It was 2 buses with a lot of people. What happened?
Sure was. Well, I think as everyone knows, we often have conversations with state folks about what we need here in Summit County to help resolve our housing crisis. So the idea of the tour was to invite all of those folks to Summit County to see some of the things we're working on, to have some conversations about some of the challenges that we face, really with the end goal of helping our legislators pass policy that's really going to help Summit County. So we talked a lot about funding, we talked a lot about area median income, and how we need more flexibility in those state funding formulas. We talked a lot about the innovation that's really coming out of Summit County at the moment, and it's innovation for the entire state, really. We toured a number of projects with our partners at the town of Breckenridge, who helped us host this event, and really showed folks what it's like to live here, what overcrowding looks like, instead of thinking about homelessness like you might see on the Front Range. We talked a lot about the fact that, I think we're going to talk about this later, but our housing needs assessment shows that to live in Summit County right now and buy a single family home, you need a household income of $465,000. So basically all 4 of us together can buy a home in Summit County. Pretty exciting. So we share that with our legislative friends in the hopes that as they contemplate their various pieces of legislation for the upcoming year, they'll be thoughtful about our dynamics.
It would be interesting for meetings, though. We could just invite everybody over.
Much more convenient. That's right.
But it is depressing. That's tough.
Yeah, it is hard. For as hard as the prior BOCC and now this BOCC is working on housing, and as hard as our councils and municipal partners are working on housing, we really have a long way to go. And we're not seeing the kind of relief on the inflationary, items that we were hoping to see, and so that does continue to compound the problem.
Right. What are you hoping to get out of this meeting, this legislative housing tour? What's next?
This is a great question. We know a lot of the legislators that were there ran various pieces of legislation last session. I expect that a lot of that will come back this session. So the conversations around land use and how we incentivize middle housing, light, gentle density, that'll come back. The conversations around housing funding in general and how we go from a model that really only funds housing that is 80% or under to one that really allows us to build from 0 to 150% AMI, that'll probably come back. There were a lot of conversations about rent control, so I expect we'll hear those again. And then there was a bill that I really was a loud advocate for, which would have allowed counties to make an offer on multifamily housing to protect it. I'm hoping that one comes back. I think, there were something like 17 serious housing bills last session. I expect we'll see more this session. And so really it's helping folks understand just how broken our market is in Summit County and what we need to get back to functional.
Right. We're really reflective, I think, of all of our mountain communities. So huge kudos to Tamara and then Mayor Eric Mamula from Breckenridge for hosting this. I think people unfairly characterize us, meaning mountain communities, as having all this money. Well, yes, there's a lot of money here, but we're supporting the state's economy when it comes to tourism, and there's a lot of downsides with that. And so giving a lot of Front Range folks an opportunity, you guys gave them an opportunity to see what we're dealing with here, I think was incredibly important. So thank you for leading that.
Happy to do it. They asked great questions. It was a great dialogue, and I'm looking forward to hearing the next steps.
Well, this speaks a lot to your relationships that you have in the Capitol and how important that is. And Nina, even you have worked with Speaker McCluskey and testified before on legislation. So those relationships really do make a difference for our community, and that's an important part of being on the BOCC, which is great. You you do have the housing needs assessment coming up, but kind of all part of the policy that you guys are working on and your strategic goals. Sustainability is a big part of that. So Mountain Town 2030, Elizabeth, you were a part of it the last time it came through BREC. This year it's in Vail. Tell everybody what Mountain Town 2030 is.
Yeah, so Mountain Town 2030 really came out of Park City in 2019, in the fall of 2019. At that time, the U.S. had pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord. And some mountain towns led by Park City got together and said, look, let's talk about what we can do in our own mountain communities. So a bunch of us traveled to Park City from mountain communities around the country, met, really worked on things. Of course, COVID set back, but the work continued. Last year, we were so excited to have those folks here in Summit County and Breckenridge. And now this year, we're going over to Vail. And it's really, I would say, our mountain communities across the West, but we have some folks from Canada there, some from the East Coast, that are gathering together and how we can work on strategy and policy in our own communities to fight climate change, especially at a place where it will impact our economy so much. And we know that as we're seeing more extreme storms, what's going to happen to snowpack in the future, what happens to water, but it's also a good opportunity to share ideas, whether we're looking at composting and finding out that, well, composting at 8,000 feet works pretty well, but at 9,600 feet where our landfill is, it's not working so well. And so just that difference, and other ideas on open space and regenerative use of open space, making sure that we're sequestering carbon in the best way that we can. So we're excited this year that Nina's going to attend. We're super excited. I think she has a big interest in all things environment, sustainability, etc. I cannot wait for her to get in there, meet with some of these leaders. We'll have Governor Inslee from the state of Washington is one of our keynote speakers. He'll be there. It's really a wonderful time for our sustainability managers that we have at all of our municipalities in Summit County, as well as the county, and all of those other ski resort communities, when you think about, to get together, exchange ideas, and also focus on goals.
It'll be a great entrance into the world of relationship building with policymakers and broad thinkers on sustainability. Nina, you mentioned earlier that you are on the water quite a bit in your free time. Elizabeth mentioned that might be ending, but free time in general. But, talk about some of the things that are a big deal for you in the water space, and how maybe Mountain Town and these kinds of sustainability efforts and conferences might be, help you build more policy as a commissioner.
Absolutely. So I feel like looking forward to the future of water, especially in the West, in the Mountain West of the United States, is something that is the one issue, if not one of the first, that I feel like has the ability to bring us all together. Doesn't matter what letters next to your name on a ballot. Doesn't matter, who you represent. Water is critical to the future of our lives. Not only the way it comes out of the sky, how it covers our ski hills, and then how it flows downstream, managing and continuing to grow our recreation economy, our agricultural economy that exists, within Summit County, but then also further north. And so I'm so excited and looking forward to taking the advantage of going to Mountain Town 2030 and making some of those connections and working with policymakers. This is the first time I've ever had the opportunity to actually make policy. And so I'm really looking forward to discovering working with all of, our constituents, and then working with those who have a deeper depth of knowledge on the subject, and creating policies that work best for Summit County. And I think that, all of these people who are working towards this greater goal, this greater vision of a world where we can have, a thriving life with water and our environments protected while still simultaneously working together to, fuel our dreams, is what I hope to continue to grow. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's exciting, but obviously, with the topic at hand, it's a little overwhelming.
That's okay.
But I
That's
think
all
that we
right.
have, if we work together, I think we can chip away at it pretty well.
That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
And all of our ski area partners attend this, as well as our
Yeah.
energy providers as well. They are part of this conversation. We cannot do this in a vacuum as local government.
Yes.
And so it really takes those large companies that are operating in our community to be a willing partner in this as well.
And I think it's worth mentioning the power of all the ski resorts. The ski industry is enormous. Summit County has 4 of them. Summit County is one of 3 counties in the state that contributes $1 billion to state coffers. So that's Denver, El Paso, and then Summit. Who knew? But when you think about how many people visit here and count on snow, that count on water, that count on our forest health, it makes a lot of sense. So I jump around a little bit, but let's step back and talk about, last week, Wildflower Childcare Center. You all cut the ribbon last week. Elizabeth, I know you were there unpacking boxes, and you're so incredibly proud of all the little tiny tables that I wanted to sit in, but I couldn't. Talk about what it means to the northern part of the county, and what was Summit County's contribution?
Yeah, well, I think back to running the Strong Future question tomorrow, explaining how we needed an additional child care center on the north end of the county, and we had a child care desert over there, which we did. And so the fact that now this has finally come to fruition. Today, September 11th, is the first day little children are in there. We are so excited. It's a great spot. It's going to serve about 100 families across the county, but especially on that north end of the county. Folks that live in Lower Blue Basin and the Snake River Basin, live or work, are prioritized there, which is great because we're a little, we need so many child care spots, but we have a lot of centers in the south end of the county. And so opening that up, having more spots there is important. Nina, I'm sure you've seen it as you've been driving by and watching it be built. It's really incredible. It's a LEED certified building. It's beautiful inside, and we are so excited for the operator. Wildflower Nature School is the nonprofit that's operating the center, led by Tiernan Gannon and then her team of assistant directors, Mel and Angela. And they have an amazing staff there, a very qualified staff. I was talking to one of the teachers, and she has her master's in early childhood, and I mean, it's just great, and she just has a real passion for this. So getting that building open was certainly a feat. We couldn't have done it without the town of Silverthorne. We're grateful for their contribution of the land as well as a financial contribution, but really to the taxpayers of Summit County for saying, yes, this is important to us. We want to get this done, and having that strong future money that we could do this. And boy, it was very fulfilling when it opened.
The turnout was amazing.
Yes, I only have one child, but my second child was Wildflower. And so watching that come to fruition, started working on that in early 2019, and then finally cutting the ribbon last week. It's just, I can't even tell you how amazing it is.
I think it's fair to say that Elizabeth's being modest. That center would not have happened but for her
Thank you.
leadership. So
Thank you.
on behalf of all the parents who will have kids go through that
Absolutely.
center for decades to come,
Thank you.
we are grateful.
Thank you. I just have had a few phone calls from families that got in even 1 day a week or 2 days a week, and I always get emotional, but what it does for those families, and I know what it did for me when I got a spot in childcare for my daughter way back in 2006, and how that changed my life, and how my daughter and I were able to stay here and live here. And now I serve this community in this capacity. And so knowing what a difference it can make, and I'm so happy for those families and the staff and all the good stuff that comes along with it. So
They are very excited about it because the turnout to that event. So ribbon
lot
cutting
of
is
people came.
usually
Yeah,
that
it was great.
was
Yeah.
big. That was a great time.
I think we had like 150 folks there.
that's what
that
I
were checking
heard.
it
It's
out.
amazing.
But we're not done on that
No.
space. It seems like we're always, the wait lists are still, our staff
Yeah.
is still experiencing, you know, 1 year, 2 year wait lists. People are planning
Four.
childcare for they're planning childcare before they're planning to have
That's right.
a family,
Yeah.
to build their family. And so talk about the next one, or the one that's in the planning stage now over at Copper Mountain.
Sure. So we're super excited about this at Copper Mountain. Myself and Catherine Schaff, who's the executive director of ECO, we're at a Summit Chamber board meeting and talking about just the dire need for childcare, and if any businesses have any ideas. Well, Peter Siegel, who is the director of Copper Mountain Resort Association, was sitting in that meeting. He came back a couple months later and said, I think I might have something. We have some empty space over at Copper. What if we build a childcare center? I couldn't believe my ears. Someone wants to willingly, because it's been the government for so long, wants to build a childcare center. And we said, okay, let's talk about it. This is going to serve about 44 kids, so about 50 families. We're excited to have childcare in Copper because currently we have families that live and work in Copper, and they're maybe driving to Breckenridge or Dillon for childcare and then having to go back to work. And so to have something more local for them is huge. Already, I just heard last week that 31 kids are already signed up.
Wow.
That will open in January. It will be an all ages center as well. They're going to be open Tuesday through Saturday. So it really helps that resort worker, that family that maybe, what if a parent's a nurse? What if a family's on ski patrol, etc.? They might have to work on Saturdays. And so to open that up, which is huge. We were proud to partner with them on that. Again, thankful and grateful for Copper Mountain Resort Association, and I put that plea out there. If you have extra commercial space, if you're a large business, if you might have some ideas, reach out to us on how we could partner with you. And also huge kudo to the state of Colorado that provided a very, very significant grant to open this. So that was wonderful, to the tune of $600,000. So we're proud of that. Pleased to hear it. And I think we have one more childcare center that we're talking about. So this will kind of segue into what I think tomorrow we'll talk about next. I believe what we're planning next is a childcare center at Lake Hill. That's the piece of land we've talked about for how long?
18 years.
18 years. Okay. So, but childcare on it is somewhat new. So,
it is,
talking about
for
that between Frisco and Dillon on the Dam Road. So, we currently have set aside in our latest development plans there at minimum a 10,000 square foot childcare center there, which would rival one of our large centers. So, serve 60 to 70 kids, and again about 100 families. So we have that planned right now. In negotiations with Town of Frisco to talk about how we get water to that site so that we can open that up. That would really make a huge dent in this. Lake Hill's evolving. Commissioner Pogue knows way more about where we are in the process right now.
Sure.
I'll probably try to focus on that child care piece, let her focus on the housing piece. Maybe we'll put Nina on the water piece. We got to have water to run child care and housing, but so it will really be an important team effort.
That's great. You know, Lake Hill is a great example of kind of this holistic strategy you guys have looked at, that it really isn't just a matter of let's throw money and provide a service or shelter or family services, human services to people because they don't need to pay for it. It really does have to. It has to do with our workforce being able to serve our guests, because otherwise at Copper Mountain, if folks can't drop their kids off and have reliable childcare, they're not able to help the guest experience up here. So it's an economic issue.
That's right.
Internally and externally.
Yeah, and we all know folks that have had trouble getting into childcare. We understand what that does to local businesses. It's an important piece. No one's just willingly, besides our folks at Copper Resort Association, really opening childcare centers. It's expensive to do. We understand that. Staffing is difficult. That's also a plea that if you might have available housing, reach out. Any master leases we can do for childcare teachers and working with our early childhood options on that would be great.
Great. That's good. Expensive, hard to do. Call us if you want a part of
Yes.
that action. Okay. So again, back to this kind of holistic and, serving the needs of the entire community and our guests. We just completed or reviewed and got presented the latest housing needs assessment. Last time that was done, I believe, was
2019 is the last time we did an update.
So
Things have changed a bit.
Just a smidge.
things have changed. You mentioned that incredible number of what you need to earn here to buy a market rate house. What else was in that document and what's next?
Yeah, there's a lot of really sobering information in the housing needs assessment. The housing needs assessment is done by all of the municipalities and a county. It's a joint effort. And it really is an economic study of where our community sits. So when they are putting together the data, they are looking at what kind of housing we need to support people who are already here. And the way they determine those numbers is really based on the number of jobs that are here. So for Summit County to continue to be that economic driver in the state, we have to figure out what our housing need is so that we can have the people here to thrive into the future. And the people are already here, but they are largely commuting in from other counties that increasingly also don't have the housing they need to support us.
Yeah.
So over 50% of Summit County's workforce now commutes in from surrounding counties, and that drive time is getting longer and longer and longer, which means that those folks really have a choice as to where they work, and they don't have to work in Summit County, which ultimately will have a pretty significant impact on our community. So what the housing needs assessment showed is there are very, very deep disparities between our lower wage, largely Spanish-speaking community, and then some of our more affluent community members. Summit Daily has written a great 4-series article on that, and I would really encourage anyone who's interested in this topic to read it. It was very well done, in my opinion. So it showed a lot of disparities, like Summit County has the highest percentage of overcrowding of any of our surrounding counties. Overcrowding is a different form of homelessness than people usually think about, right? In Summit County, our winters are so long and cold that folks largely can't live outside. And so what do? They double up, they triple up, they quadruple up. And in fact, we are seeing, 15 people living in a home because they can't find housing in other places. So that was one of the things it showed. In addition to all the work that Summit County and the municipalities have done on housing, there are about 1,200 units in the pipeline right now, which is great. We are far ahead as a percentage of any other community in Colorado. But it also showed that in addition to all of those units, we still need another 2,500 units. So obviously Lake Hill is going to be a big part of that solution. Very expensive to live here, very expensive to find housing here, no question. And it's interesting, there's sort of a bifurcation of need that we're starting to see, right? So folks that are between 120 AMI and 150% AMI, there's really significant need. And then there's also really significant need 80% AMI and below. So what we're seeing is that it is increasingly hard to find workforce, but increasingly the other folks that are getting squeezed are folks you would traditionally think of as our middle class, right? And we see that, when it's hard to find a new commissioner candidate, or when it's hard to find school board candidates, or when it's hard to find people to sit on our planning commissions or to sit on the board of the Summit Foundation. So to be a thriving community, we need to continue to build housing across the entire economic spectrum. That was really my primary takeaway from the assessment.
So just for the audience, AMI, area median income,
Yep.
When you're looking at those numbers, what defines, what's the missing middle? What is this middle part? What's the lower wage? How do those calculations play into financing and deed restrictions and the actual development of more workforce housing?
Yeah, so traditionally, federal dollars and state dollars were how folks paid for housing. And federal funding is really limited to 60% AMI and below. So as an example, 80% AMI is about what you would earn when you start at a ski resort, which means that most folks in our community don't qualify for housing that's built with those federal and state dollars. And we hear a lot of frustration. Then there's this gap in the middle that's called middle income housing, which is traditionally talked about as between 80% and 120. So our first responders, our nurses, all of the folks sitting around this table, sort of those middle income earners who have been here for a minute. The problem is in Summit County, all of those numbers shift upwards because we are a high cost of living community. So someone who is at 150% AMI wouldn't qualify for a lot of the housing Summit County government builds because we want to access federal and state dollars. So going back to that legislative housing tour, what we continue to advocate for is more flexibility. So we can, first of all, build 60 to 80% AMI, which is where we see the deepest need on the housing needs assessment, but so that we can also make sure that some of the middle income earners that aren't currently qualifying for deed restricted housing can, because they can't get into market rate housing anymore, back to that $465,000 a year housing. So we really are trying to build a pipeline of housing from the person who has been here for just a minute to the person that has been here for 15 to 20 years.
Great, and just so folks know, the housing needs assessment is really county-wide. This is the
right.
municipalities all play a role. It's not just Summit County here. We've got a lot of great partnerships and collaborations between all of the municipalities.
We do, and I think this is far and away the best housing need assessment I've seen in my 20 years of working in this space in Summit County. It is really thorough, it is really detailed. It definitely calls out a lot of the disparities. But the other thing it does is break down where the housing is in our community and where we need more housing. And so that, you can look at Dillon, for example, and what their, deficit is. You can look at unincorporated Summit County and what our deficit is. There are places where you can start to see what Keystone's deficit will be or what Breckenridge's deficit will be. So there's a lot of detail in this document. I think it is hundreds and hundreds of pages. We fortunately got the top line data as part of the draft process, but there will be lots more to come as we dig in and try and figure it out. I think one of the things I was most excited about is that the strategies that the consultants who did this recommended are largely strategies we are already working on in unincorporated Summit County. So we know we're on the right track, which is great news. We just need more of what we're doing.
So this will be online, summitcountyco.gov/housing. It'll be along the bottom of your screen there, and people can download, maybe not hundreds and hundreds of pages of light reading.
If you're up late at night,
sure.
I'd welcome anybody's comments.
Yes, but in all seriousness, in that section, our housing department has these pillars for their housing strategy, and it isn't just building. There are so many other strategies we continue to talk about that are important to capturing all this. So development is one, but there are many other tools that we're trying to conserve and do buy downs, and all these other tools are there. People can read about them and maybe participate and help us spread the message across the community how important it is for our workforce to be able to live here and work here.
That's right.
Great. Thank you very much. Again, my three commissioners, it's so great to have you, Nina. Nina Waters, Tamara Pogue, Elizabeth Lawrence. I'm Dave Rossi. Stay tuned for another edition of County Connection coming your way soon.